Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. Top trade and finance officials from South Korea and the U.S. sat down in Washington for high-level talks on Thursday in a strategic 2+2 format. The U.S. had requested the meeting, underscoring the urgency and weight of the agenda. Now, with the current mutual tariff suspension set to expire July 8th and industrial stakes running high, much attention was focused on the meeting, which could prove to be a turning point in the economic bilateral relationship. Though the Korean government emphasized this was a consultation, not a negotiation, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent called it a success, stating that Korea had brought its best proposal. The rare praise hints at substantive groundwork being laid, possibly in key sectors like energy, shipbuilding, and advanced manufacturing. So, with formal negotiations set to begin next week and a change of government on the horizon in Seoul, the key question now is whether both sides can reach a consensus before political dynamics, policy differences, and mounting pressure coming into play. For a deeper discussion on this, we are joined by Kim Mok-yeon, professor at Seogang Business School. Welcome, Professor.
Hello, thanks for having me here.
And also joining us is Troy Stanganger, former senior director at the Korea Economic Institute. Great to have you.
Good to be here. Thank you.
So let us begin a discussion with Director Stanganger. So like I've said, the high-level talks between South Korea and the U.S. took place at the request of the U.S. First of all, why do you think the U.S. proposed this 2+2 format involving both the Treasury Secretary and the Trade Representative?
There are a few reasons. The Trump administration has structured its economic team differently than prior administrations. President Trump early on said that Secretary Lutnick would be leading any trade talks for the administration. And at the same time, we've seen some shifting authority within the administration. The move to such high levels of tariffs, it seems clearly was driven by Peter Navarro. But we know that it was Secretary Bessent and Secretary Lutnick who convinced President Trump that we needed to do a 90-day pause, try to engage in negotiations. And shortly after that came out, he said that both he, Secretary Lutnick, and USTR Jamieson Greer would be taking and leading in discussions. So part of this is structurally about how the Trump administration is running its trade policy. And in terms of Treasury specifically, we know that currency wasn't discussed yesterday, but there are going to be follow-on discussions about exchange rate policy. And so part of this is about, because the Trump administration views exchange rate policy as a key component in this, including the Treasury Secretary in those discussions as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's also bring in Professor Kim into the conversation. So the Korean government emphasized that this was just a consultation, not really a negotiation. How would you assess the significance of this meeting first?
Yeah, first of all, Korean government is trying to have very careful approach for this negotiation. They know that it has a very high weight on this negotiation. It's very significant way that it's going to lead to a great result for Korean economic situation. So in this meeting, basically, well, we're not going for, the ending point is our negotiation. But before we're going to have a negotiation, well, we're going to put our exploratory and constructive estimate here so that we're going to try to agree to continue working level meetings, but we're going to call on the discussion. So we're trying to have some good approach, but we're going to focus on the 4 key areas. First one, of course, the tariff issues, and economic security, and investor cooperation, and monetary policy. But in the Korean government perspective, well, the timing is kind of is closely related to our political situation. So we're not going to in a hurry situation. We are very in calm situation, but we're going to show all the process for the negotiation to the Korea public. So basically, we're going to set up those kind of foundation, but it's for all, the purpose is for all the future negotiations.
Right, so setting the tone for future dialogue with a new government, of course, because we have a snap election coming in. Now, following this talks, the U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent described Korea as having brought its best proposal and called the consultation a success. Well, while the details were not actually disclosed, what do you think Korea proposed, and why did the U.S. respond to this so positively? And do you think it could relate to industrial cooperations like energy or shipbuilding as well?
That's likely the case. There are a few things we know the Trump administration has been very focused on. One is the LNG pipeline project in Alaska, which there have been signals coming from Seoul that it is open to taking and being a partner in. The other is shipbuilding. I think shipbuilding is actually probably the most substantial one here. If we look at the United States right now, it averages roughly 5 commercial ships built a year. South Korea averages over 700 commercial ships built a year. This is a vast, significant difference. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz had identified U.S. domestic shipbuilding capabilities has a significant national security risk. And so I think we're likely talking about some type of understanding of additional investment in U.S. shipyards, perhaps the transfer of some technology to the United States. But all of this, I think, is a key top objective for the administration. And at the end of the day, the reality is while there are other potential partners, maybe Japan, South Korea is really the only country that could take and perhaps substantially provide this type of assistance to the United States. So it sounds like South Korea put a good proposal on the table. It's meeting the U.S. needs, and there's potentially real opportunities here.
Now, it has been reported that both countries agreed to work on a so-called July package ahead of the expiration of the mutual tariff suspension in July 8th, which would address tariff elimination and also industrial cooperation, of course. Professor Kim, in your view, what is the biggest sticking point in reaching this agreement?
I think first attention that the Korean government is trying to do, get the exemption for those kind of tariff. Basically, that's kind of the approach that they're trying to have. So what kind of the industry that we're going to have a lot of impact on the Korean industry? First, of course, is automotive tariff. Well, for example, like Hyundai Motors cases where they establish a huge investment plan for the U.S. mainland. So based on those kind of leverage, basically, we're trying to get the exemption in those kind of tariffs, especially in the automobile industry. And the second point they're trying to do, of course, the political timing. As you know, the Korean government, basically, we are in the transition of the president election. So why are we going to talk about the July package? Well, in this kind of government transition, basically, we are not in a hurry. So we're going to continue those kind of negotiation, and we're trying to get the best out of this negotiation. And the last one is the industrial cooperation. Basically, what we're trying to do, especially for the shipbuilding and energy industry, where we gonna cooperate with the U.S. industry. So we're looking for those kind of cooperation, and by using those kind of leverage that we trying to get the most out of from those kind of negotiations in July.
So with this deadline looming, ironing out those tariff terms would be tricky, and there's still a lot of stake. Now to Director Stanganger. President Trump has previously referred to a one-stop shop approach, suggesting that defense cost sharing could be bundled up with trade negotiations as well. But this, it said that there was no mention of this topic during this round of consultations. Why do you think this is the reason?
Well, we know that defense cost sharing is a key issue for President Trump and will likely come up at some point. But right now, I think the administration's focus is on getting a deal on trade. We've seen the administration have to shift its position based on market concerns, both in the bond market and the stock market, to the president's approach to tariffs. The administration is trying to demonstrate that tariffs can be used to take and get better deals for the United States. And so there really needs to be a focus on that. Korea is one of the 5 initial partners that the administration is looking to. And while Japan, this did come up, and we do know part of that is because there is a deadline of about a year from now to get a new cost-sharing agreement with Japan. There's already an agreement in place with South Korea. It may not be an agreement President Trump likes, but in the terms of hierarchy, getting something in place that resolves the tariff issues quickly, demonstrates the administration's ability to cut deals, is likely more important for the administration right now than dealing with the cost sharing issue. That doesn't mean cost sharing won't come up later, but that's likely why we haven't seen this rise at the moment.
Right. So it is indeed a strategic decision to exclude the topic in this decision. Now, some people actually believe that defense cost sharing could come up in the next round, and Korea maintains its stance that trade and security are separate matters. Given this, Professor Kim, how should South Korea prepare for future discussions?
Basically, where there is a lot of debate between where the South Korea try to separate the trade and defense or not, but we set up the kind of direction that we're gonna, separate the trade and defense in this negotiation because there are some reasons, especially for those kind of defense. Cost sharing issue is already set. We made an agreement with the U.S. government, so it's gonna be basically it's gonna those kind of contribution through like 2030. So since this kind of defense cost sharing is already set, we're going to focus on those kind of trade negotiation or tariff negotiation, so that we're gonna set up those kind of strategic alliance or strategic rationale in our alliance stability, in those kind of security issues or economic issues with the U.S. And we also going to use those kind of cost sharing, the defense cost sharing with as a negotiating leverage with U.S. government. So we're going to deal with those kind of in the separate way, but we're trying to maintain the strong alliance with the U.S. in economic way and those kind of national defense way, so that we can get some synergy impact on these two areas when we try to negotiate in the U.S. government.
Right. So we have to actually find balance in both areas. Now, after this consultations, the Korean government said that both sides shared understanding of the need for calm and orderly discussions, taking Korea's political schedule, of course, into account. But U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent stated that the talks are moving actually quickly, and he suggested a deal could be reached as early as next week. Director, how do you interpret this difference in tone between the two sides?
I think there are a couple things going on at this point. One, as Professor Kim has noted, there is an election taking place in South Korea that places the acting government in a difficult situation of needing to lead negotiations, and lead them and get them done before tariffs come in place by July 8th, but also take and deal with the reality that there will likely be a new government that will take and strike this deal, and that new government's interests need to be put into place. Now, at the same time, the United States is working on a slightly different schedule, which is that by July 8th, it has these 5 initial countries and likely wants to probably do deals with more countries to try and demonstrate that President Trump is a successful deal maker. And so there is a desire on the United States side to push these negotiations forward more quickly. This is probably also a leveraging tactic by the administration to try and get South Korea to agree to something quickly. And so I think what we're seeing here is the different needs of both South Korea and the United States sort of being demonstrated. One needing perhaps a slightly slower pace, one needing a quicker pace to try and move the negotiations forward for its own domestic economic political reasons.
Right, so definitely a difference in tone. We're seeing a clear difference depending on the interests of each country. Now, formal negotiations actually are expected to begin as early as next week, but a comprehensive agreement, including tariff elimination, may be reached under the next Korean administration and the Trump administration. So in this case, Director, how should the current Korean government respond to the fast pace being pushed by the U.S.?
So because there is this desire to avoid tariffs being placed on South Korea by July 8th, there's a need to take and move these negotiations forward. At the same time, I think there's a couple things that have to take place. One is the acting government is going to have to be prepared to quickly and thoroughly brief the incoming government after the election So that way they are prepared to take over these talks and maybe even make decisions about keeping some of the current people in place, at least until these talks are done. But at the same time, I think, we don't know who the PPP or the DPK candidates will be yet. But once both sides have nominees, it's going to be incumbent, I think, on both political parties to have serious internal discussions about what they want to see in a deal, how they want to see the deal structured. So that way, when they go to talk to the acting administration, both sides can quickly get on the same page after the election, depending on who the winner is, and quickly move these negotiations forward. Because once the election is done, there will be roughly a month left to try and conclude these talks. And so there's going to have to be a lot of work done on both sides, both the acting government and whoever the winner is, to ensure that there's a smooth transition to get these discussions over the finish line.
Right. So regardless of who wins, a swift and brief information, giving out the information would be very important. What about Professor Kim? Do you have any thoughts on this?
I think Korean government is trying to emphasize the impact of tariff in Korea's economy, because due to the high tariff from the U.S. government, I think that there are many damages that our Korean economy is really going to have due to those kind of situation. Because of these reasons, the Korean government has to show all the transparency in this negotiation process. Basically, the Korean politics and Korean government, Korean citizens, of course, they want to know how this negotiation is going on and what kind of result they're going to get due to those kind of process. Therefore, I think time, it's not a matter for us. The process is kind of the step that we're trying to go through for this negotiation is very important to show that all the transparency. Therefore, of course, that we're going to have political issues too, but showing those kind of critical process for the negotiation is kind of very important for Korea's government.
Right. Now, along this, staying on this, from April 1st to the 20th, South Korea's exports to the U.S. actually dropped 14.3% compared to the same period last year. Now, even auto parts, which have yet to face tariffs, actually declined by 1.7%. Professor Kim, what's driving this decline in export performance, and what kind of economic impact do you think could the now full-fledged Korea-U.S. trade talks have?
Because the Korea's economic situation is it's not that good right now, but basically between the U.S. and China, that we try to convert our exports mainly to the U.S. This is kind of a conversion process. During those process, where basically the tariff is play a very negative impact on our Korea economy. So basically all the economic numbers for Korea after President Trump is going to issue those kind of tariff issues. Well, it's going to show a very negative sign in every situation. So basically, what we're trying to do, there's the short-term uncertainty, and we're trying to eliminate those kind of uncertainty in those kind of situation. After we after we finish our negotiation, those kind of uncertainty will be eliminated. So those kind of the situation that we're trying to look for, and also after we trying to finish those kind of negotiation, we're trying to boost up those kind of investment, and we talk about those kind of collaboration, and we also talk about those kind of economic situation. So basically, what we're trying to do by working on those negotiations, the Korea's economy's uncertainty will be reduced or minimized, so that we can estimate those kind of growth of the economy, and we trying to show some direction for the short term as well as the long term economic perspective. That's the direction that we're trying to look for.
Mm-hmm. So even though these numbers paint a concerning picture of 14% drop, let's hope the momentum for these talks would stabilize trade flows as well moving forward. Now, as of now, we will have to wrap up our program for tonight. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights, Director Stanganger and Professor Kim. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.